Welcome, everybody, to another episode of FTD series. Today, we're going to be talking about a cool idea that Hayden had, the Colorado GM. He had the idea to kind of do a system rankings of all the farm systems in the league. He had the idea to do it in an ELO chart, which, for any of you that don't know, essentially it's kind of a ranking system with the higher number being the better. Everything starts at a standardized score, and you take like a ton of matchups, like Team A versus Team B. Whichever one wins gets like a +1, and the other one gets like a -1, and they just keep going against each other in a huge battle royale type thing until everyone's done a big enough sample size and evens out. So then the winner just keeps winning, and the ELO score keeps going up, and so eventually the best teams go to the top, and the worst teams go to the bottom. So you can do it with anything, prospects or teams. So that's what's going to be really fun. This one, we started with the teams. We'll do the prospects later in the week, I think, is his plan. So he put it all together and sent out the rankings. So after we have hundreds and hundreds of the rankings from farm systems against each other, and this is what it came out to. So on my screen right now is I have an Excel. We did like a cool chart here. Shows the teams on the bottom and then the scores on the left. So again, the higher the better. So on the right side would be the best farm systems. So we'll kind of break it down here. And I have Tyler on the video, San Francisco Giants, and he'll explain to you a little bit about his ranking. So I kind of showed his on the screens. He did a really in-depth rankings, spent hours and hours and hours. We were kind of talking about it, and he put a ton of work into his. And so, as you can see, he'll explain how his work. So, kind of talk about both rankings, the ELO system, and his have a little bit more tiers in them. What's up, Tyler?
Hey, what's going on, Dan? Yeah, so it's cool to compare these across each other. Mine was basically taking into account, kind of the system I use for ranking players. There's a few things that mine didn't account for that I'm sure people voting did. I limited mine to prospects that were 24 and younger. No international complex guys were considered in mine, so any of these recent July 2nd guys didn't make the cut for helping out the systems here. Kind of the numbers split out next to mine are representative of top 50 players. So kind of where it says top 100 players, that's a combination of the top 50 hitters and top 50 pitchers. So you see kind of the top teams have seven or so in the top 100 players, which is pretty impressive, all the way up to 200, 500, and 1,000. So those aren't necessarily entirely in order. It's just kind of a grouping of showing kind of who has the top tier of talent, who has more of the depth of those top 1,000 players. And I just tried to put them in an order that made somewhat sense. I think even when I filled out Hayden's thing, some of the orders flipped for me based on this, but good way to see both the systems that have really top tier talent as well as those that have a lot of depth.
Yeah, so that's as he was talking there, I showed on the screen the four numbers there he's talking about. So that first number, we'll explain that later. It's a little more complex. We'll probably leave that out, but essentially he's talking about these four in the brackets here. So yeah, that first one is 7 is the top 100, and then the 11 is the top 200. So pretty neat way of, like you said, kind of telling the depth. So as you can see by the rankings that spit out for him, that the White Sox came out on top, even though they only had 42 top 1,000 guys. Even though the Mets here come out fourth on that list at 54, but as you can see, that 7 top guys really just kind of makes a difference. All those superstars that the White Sox have at the top of the system, which we'll show later on in the video. So we'll start at the bottom here, and if we'll pull up Cincinnati on out of the park. So you can see Cincinnati kind of went all in on this year, got a lot more veteran talent than they've had. Unfortunately, things haven't gone super hot for them in the first half of the season, but they put together a pretty talented squad. So I imagine if they sell off at the deadline, they should be able to recoup a lot of those prospects they gave up. And then they also, Tyler will pull them up here in a second, talk about them. The elite pitcher they drafted, which is their lone top 100 guy, and then they have 3 top 200 guys in our list. I'll pull up my screen here. I think it's Whitaker. Is that the right name there?
That's right. Yeah, no, great pick for the Reds this year. He doesn't come out quite as high from it. Oh, the OSA is very high on him in the rankings. I still think he's a top 20 pitcher, but having him all the way up as the number 4 prospect is pretty impressive. So obviously a great job with that pick there. They have a couple other guys who filled out the top 100 the top 200 officially. One's a reliever who falls pretty far down their ranking. Mike Snell, he's got 80 stuff. He's a little trouble with movement, but could be a nice option there. And the other is a bat, Tony Romero, who's a 17-year-old with some big time hit potential there. So it's a pretty light system, and like you said, they made a lot of moves. It's a system that's fluctuated, right? They've had a ton of talent at times and less at others, but making good draft picks like Whitaker is a good secret for success there.
Yeah, I really like that Romero profile. That's pretty really good bat to be ranked so far in the OSA there. Interesting. They have an 80 contact on them. They still don't have him quite as high as some other guys. So that's interesting. All right. Okay, so I edited out some stuff. I actually screwed up my order there, so I unpaused it here. Hopefully, it lines up correctly. So next team we had on the list here is we're going by the Dodgers here. So they're right above Cincinnati in the ELO rankings. The Dodgers have on Tyler's list, it says they have one guy in the top 200, and they have 24 depth pieces in the top 500. The Dodgers also have an elite prospect that's not being counted because he's in the complex still, which we mentioned. So I think they'd be quite a bit higher on this list if Marino was ranked because he's a very, very good prospect. What can you tell me about some of these other prospects?
Yeah, I think really the top guy for them probably is either well, it's either the pitcher Juan Zamora, who is really solid in advance for a 22-year-old and throws 99. Big fan of him and think he's a potential starter for them. The best bat, obviously not counting Zamora, is probably Eddie Diaz. Another guy with a pretty big hit potential, only 18, so a long way to go. Probably slots in as a first baseman long term, but like you said, it has some good depth, right? We mentioned there's 24 guys in the top 1,000, so it's just a little bit lacking on that top end talent. But another one of those teams who's made a lot of moves, traded a lot of guys to Minnesota to get Juan Vasquez, made a lot of moves to win now. They're definitely winning now. So not a surprise to see them down here at the bottom, as they used to be one of the best systems in baseball. So they've turned that over quite quickly.
Yeah, and like you said, it's kind of worked out for them. What a really amazing year they're having so far. So we'll skip on to the next one we have on the scatter plot here. Montreal. So Montreal comes up as the third lowest. Almost the same scenario you were just talking about with the Dodgers, where I'm assuming they ranked very high a couple years ago. Mike Williams, Tony Guerra, all those studs, Mitch Drew. They've all graduated just like in real life, kind of how Seattle had a bunch of top prospects like Julio Rodriguez and all those guys that graduated. But so now they've kind of lost those top guys, but and some of their depth. But really doesn't matter because their whole major league team's like 23 years old, superstars, all-star type players. But we'll still take a peek there at some of their top guys because they have one arm in particular. I know you really like, and me and you are both very high on.
Yeah, they have actually they have a handful of arms I'm really a fan of. They came up a little bit higher for me than they did in this system. And it's mainly on the back of liking a lot of their pitchers. Wood in particular was their first round pick a year ago. He has a good ways to go, but really like his potential. Couldn't believe he fell to them where they picked that year. The other is the reliever they picked this year, Robbie Candler. I think he was the best reliever in the class and has closer potential. So to get him where they did was really impressive. And then another one's John Norman. I like that pick as well. So those are three really good pitchers. They have a number of good relievers in the system. Knudsen, Bustamante, David Jackson, all really nice relievers too. So they don't need a lot of help on the bat side in the majors. Well, they don't need a lot of help on either side in the majors, but good to have just with injuries and everything, good to have a stockpile of pitching up and coming.
Yeah, and that nice little catcher too in Solano there. Big bat on that guy. So
Yeah.
next up, and then Lara doesn't count towards the system, and a really good international guy they just signed, a really beast mode bat on there. 80 contact, 65 power is pretty impressive combination. Next up, we have Milwaukee. So this is another team at the top of the standings in the major leagues right now. They come out as the fourth lowest team on this scatter plot so far. Milwaukee has on your chart, I'm showing one top 100 and two top 200 players. So that's another team that most of their talent has graduated, and they're kind of starting to trade some prospects for major league ready talent. And they also have a guy number one on this list that just signed internationally that isn't included. So another team that would probably be jumped up quite a bit by having a top 15 prospect. But what can you tell me about some of these prospects?
Yeah, yeah, I was a big fan of Eastick. I thought he was kind of the best player in this international class. So he doesn't get counted in this, but I thought that was a great get for them. The guy who comes up the highest for them is their pick this year, Jack Berkman. Big time bat potential, probably a left fielder, but really like him in that selection. They also have a good stable of catchers that are a little deeper down in their system, so good guys who could develop there, with probably David Macias being the top one. On the arm side, it's a little limited. Jeff Kushner is probably their top one for me. He's a lefty, big stuff in movement, so like him a good bit. And he's 24, so could imagine him up and contributing sometime very soon as he's in AAA right now. So a couple of bright spots in their system for sure. Mainly, as you can see, it's a lot of pitchers. But Berkman and Eastick are two young bats that are going to be fun to watch develop.
Yeah, I agree with that catcher. I really like that Messias guy as a $5 million international catcher. So kind of a good combination there. Next up, we have so we went from Milwaukee. Now we're on to Houston here. So Houston comes up next on the list. Up on your chart here, they jump up a little bit. They have some pretty decent depth, quite a bit more depth than the other teams we've looked at so far. I'm showing on your list 32 top 1,000 guys and 16 guys in the top 500. No one on this list so far has had above 11. So quite a bit more organizational depth out of Houston, along with a top prospect here.
Yeah, no, I Houston system is pretty much all pitchers, but there's some good ones in the group. In particular, Connors and Nitschke are both really good arms, and O'Donnell's not a slouch either as a third, and that's a lot of draft picks they've had recently. So on the pitching side, there's not a lot, but it's or on the hitting side, I should say, it's not a lot, but on the pitching side. Really have to like those top three arms as potential guys in that bullpen. They're another one of those teams that are, they're having a down year kind of weirdly out of nowhere as they've been competing for the playoffs. So good to see this system start to get built up. Will be interesting to see what they do at the deadline if they try to kind of bolster this system a little bit more moving forward. But those are three good pitchers to build around that could be a part of a rotation in the future.
Yeah, it was a good point. I think you're right about the bolstering the system. I think they have some of the best talent to trade at the trade deadline, and we'll talk about later in the week. They have some superstars led by Alvarez and their star shortstop and a couple. Brandon Davis they just traded, so a lot of guys that really high level talent that I think they should be able to flip. So they should be able to add a ton to the system if they want to come deadline time, which I think will probably happen. It should be able to double their numbers of top 500 guys maybe here with just a couple small trades there because those are some real valuable major league pieces they have to potentially trade that they have on the block and really good major league roster. So we should see that system jump up in the rankings pretty hard over the next couple of years here for sure. All right. Next up, we have Seattle. Seattle comes out pretty low in this scatter plot rankings as just about the sixth lowest team, but I personally have them a lot higher. And same with Tyler. He has them in the top 15 or almost top 12 here, it looks like. So huge discrepancy between the OSA and I think what people ranked, and then also what me and Tyler's rankings has. We'll show you on Excel later. But I think the main reason for that is OSA really underranks defense. They don't rank the middle of the field guys high enough if they're elite defenders, that shortstop and catcher. And that's pretty much what Seattle system's deepest on is catcher and having a top shortstop they just drafted. So I think that's part of the reason that we personally have them ranked quite a bit higher. If you look here, I'll actually peek at the Excel thing, give Tyler some time to prep on these next few teams. On Excel here, we have the prospect arms and bats ranking. So you can sort by team here. And if you go down to Seattle, you can see here that they have a ton of middle of the field talent at the top here. So a couple real good catchers ranked pretty high here. Right field plus three catchers in their top five prospect position wise, in my opinion, and then a real good center fielder and a shortstop and a right fielder. So almost all premium defensive positions there, and then a couple more shortstops right underneath that, and then another catcher. So really stacked on the middle of the field talent there for sure, which I kind of like about the system. And then if you look at the arms side of things, they have a real elite reliever here at the top, Agemeyer they just drafted, and then decent amount of depth here on the arm side, but not quite as much. Eric Vance was a really high pick last year. Mahon comes out really highly as a really balanced pitcher, 50-50, 60 potentials. and then a couple other nice starters on this list. Quite a bit of starters at the top of their rankings here. So a little better system, I think, than the bottom five, but we'll take a peek at that here. What do you think about their top prospect, those catchers, that collection of catchers they have there, Tyler?
Yeah, no, I could pretty much just co-sign everything you said. I completely agree. It's a little bit opposite. The last few we've talked through have been more pitching forward than bat forward. And I think their bats are a little suppressed in the rankings due to exactly what you just said. They're going to derive a lot of their value of being at primary hard to find positions, not necessarily being massive bats across the system. The top prospect I have in their system isn't even the top 500, and that's the catcher Marco Cuello. Granted, he's 17 and he's a catcher, so he's got a long ways to go. But him, Steve Richardson, another catcher, but in a couple of their picks they've made, Orr and Telesevich, pretty early. I think they're both top 5 picks. Good guys to have at premier positions. So it's turned into a glut of talent. You can kind of see it: catcher, shortstop, center field there for them. So good to build from the inside out. And it's a good thing to talk about. That number we didn't really touch on in my system is basically adding where they ranked in their hitting tiers to their pitching tiers. So offensively, they came out as a tier 1 team in terms of prospects, but just on the pitching side, they were in the 4th. So in terms of position player talent, they have a ton of it, even if it's not ranked very highly. So I'm kind of in agreement that this should be regarded as a top half system for sure.
Yeah, that's a couple of those. I really like those top two relief pitchers, especially. So pretty decent system for down here. Now that kind of fun going from the bottom up. Start to get a little bit more of these talented systems now that we get up this list a little bit. Next up, we have Texas. Texas ranked again quite a bit higher on your list, as they actually have four top 100 guys on the Excel rankings there, and then pretty decent depth with 31 top 1,000 guys. So Texas system actually not too shabby. Let's see here. I'll pull it up on the screen. So that's kind of led by, they just picked fourth overall this year, this elite arm, Chris Whitlock. And he is a crazy ceiling, 70 movement type arm with high work ethic. We have last year's top pick, Robbie Cazares here. Robbie Cazares is a monster bat, like a first base, left field type prospect, and a couple other depth pieces too. Nice little selection here, a little more balanced than these other teams, as they have kind of talent a little bit everywhere. A bunch of outfielders at the top here, and then you get a center fielder, a couple arms sprinkled in, a lefty arm at the top of their rankings. So that's one thing that kind of stands out to me is if you look at these OSA rankings, quite a bit of balance, position value here at the top, which is nice to see. Is there anyone that stands out on their system to you?
Yeah, it's those two guys at the top that are really, I think, premier talents. I think Whitlock is going to be one of the better starters. He's a top 10 starter for me, and then Cardenas is a top 10 position player for me. So to have two of those is pretty elite. Cardenas has one of the biggest bats you'll find anywhere in the minors. Getting off to a very hot start in rookie ball as well, just hitting the crap out of the ball down there. So it's a little shallow. It's mostly carried by, they have a lot of like first base left field types, which can get a little redundant at times, but they're good bats in a lot of places. The pitching side is Whitlock, and then a couple of relievers that I like a lot. The main one being Tim Clement. So they'll be very interesting moving forward as another team that's trying to build up and bolster that system, especially as they try to rebuild and get back into a competing mode.
Yeah, that's a fun one there. That outfielder is pretty interesting there. Hadn't looked at him in a long time. I got 70 contact, 60 power on him, that Cardenas guy. So pretty cool to see his improvement over the years in the minors, where he started as a young 17-year-old, got his butt kicked that first year. Seemed to improve quite a bit and go from 30 WRC plus to 100, and then this year just wrecking down there. So quite a cool linear improvement there, which is nice to see. All right. Next up, we have after Texas, we have Philly. So Philly comes out about the same spot on both lists. Philly, I'm showing they have two top 100 prospects and five guys in the top 200, which is pretty cool to see. So decent amount of talent there. We'll check out their system here. Looks a little bit light on the OSA side of things by this list, but I have, I'll show you the Excel side where we like them a little bit more. So we'll sort by Philly here. At the top here, we got quite a big bat that really stands out. If you look by our weighted hit potential here, kind of weights some different things in. That Cashmitter guy that just came from this last draft, big time bat on him.
Yeah, no, it's actually a tough one too when you look at their OSA. I mentioned I sort by I only counted guys that were 24 and under, so two of their top four prospects according to OSA get chopped out of the rankings. But yeah, for me, yeah, Cashmitter is the biggest bat for them moving forward. It's a little bit of a gap after him to the next one. But it's a really big time bat. And then on the arm side, I think the starter Childers has really good starting potential. It's a good fit for their ballpark. They have a lot of guys like that where they prioritize the high movement. So he's 24 and right on the cusp himself. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets a chance anytime soon. But really good numbers you can see in AAA from him this year. So solid system. Again, another team who you understand why they don't have it. They've been good for so many years now, and they're up competing again and leading their division. So they have guys who can help in the future, but a little lighter compared to some of the rebuilders.
Yeah, that I was just peeking at that Solus guy when you're talking about the guys that don't count yet. There's that complex guy. This guy was a scouting discovery and one of the bigger bats you'll see as a scouting discovery. Crazy ceiling on this guy. Pretty athletic, huge power contact, and eye combination. This is one of my favorite prospects in the league. I think he'll be a big time player one day, and a Venezuelan guy, which is pretty cool. Just turned 18 here too, so they're holding him in the complex for another year since he's a corner bat. There's no rush. Pretty amazing talent there. Next up, we have Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay comes up next on this scatter plot. They come pretty low in your rankings, but they do have a lot of depth with 29 players in the top 1,000. They just don't seem to have any on the list here in the top portion of it with the top 100 and top 200 guys. But another team that's traded quite a bit. They made a big trade last year, trading away a top prospect, and one of the guys that comes out top five in my entire rankings is Talbot, the third base shortstop they traded to get a nice arm, a Celia or whatever his name is. And a couple trades like that, they have a pretty stacked major league roster. So they don't come up super high on this list, but they do still have some pieces that kind of stand out a little bit, led by Estrada, who actually doesn't count for our list. He's an international guy that just signed for $5 million. Really elite center field talent for his age. Big ceiling, pretty raw prospect, but pretty talented dude. And as you can see, every single one of the other top 19 guys on the OSA list is a pitcher, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it kind of goes in agreement with OSA. Mike Graham is their top guy for me. Really solid pitcher. Kind of fits the profile of Childers we just talked about in a lot of ways, but think he's definitely a guy that could contribute to the rotation. They do have good depth. A lot of these guys rank in the top 1,000. It's usually why they're so high in the organizational rankings. A lot of good talent throughout, but they don't really have any elite talent. I think their top bat for me is actually their number 32 prospect, according to OSA, Brad Rash, kind of a rangy center fielder. So not a lot on the offensive side to mention, but obviously getting Estrada is going to be a game changer for them with the bats. But do think at least Mike Graham has some good potential as a starter.
Yeah, it's a nice player for sure. All right, next up we have from Tampa Bay, we move over to Colorado, one of the top teams in the major leagues right now. Yet another team that's assembled a lot of talent at the highest level, sometimes at the expense of the farm. They just traded two of their top guys. I'll peek over at Toronto here for a second. We'll talk about these guys later when we go over Toronto. But the guys that ranked real high on Toronto's list here, they just got in a trade for the reliever. They just traded their or sorry, I forget the names off the top of my head, but if we go back to Colorado here, They just we can see on the trade actually he's probably shown up in the DFA's. They just picked up the closer Parnell. So for Parnell, they had to give up a real good pitching prospect and Josh Morrell, who comes up real high rated. So he was one of their prospects, and then Thigpen. Thigpen was another pretty highly rated prospect, a 20-year-old with a huge power bat. So they have to make some trades like that for some win now players. But they have a pretty still have a pretty nice collection of talent here in the system. Led again, another team led by probably their top guy, not showing up on this list yet, so he's still in the complex. But a shortstop that looks real amazing, a second base shortstop type talent down there in the complex with 65 hit tool and Camposano. But still some other guys popping up pretty high in this list that are in their minors right now, led by who do we got here at the top, Tyler?
Yeah, well, it would have been Josh Morrell, right? So that's an interesting one. Morrell,
Right.
I had rated as their top starter, and then Chris Thigpen came out there as their fourth best hitter. So that's a good bit of talent in their system they gave up. It might be their first round pick this year on the offensive side, Mason Trumbo. I do quite like their 19th prospect, Steve McCoy. He's a little older center fielder. He would actually be a nice fit for them there. But Trumbo's probably it definitely has the highest bat potential in their system. Villalobos might be close as well, but he's going to be a fun one to watch develop. He could hit the crap out of the ball in that park. On the pitching side, they have some interesting starters. Espinoza and Coaxum are both two pretty good arms to still have and try to build around. Two very high movement guys, so guys that are prioritized in a ballpark like Colorado. So they have some guys that kind of fit the formula of what has worked there. So yeah, even with that trade, giving up who I think was their top prospect in Josh Morrell, they still have some nice pieces there.
Yeah, that's a lot of really developed talent at the top there too. And Steve Parker and Ramos, a couple guys, 25 years old. This is a team that could still make a lot of moves at the deadline here, moving some of these guys for some more major league talent as they have to compete with such a core amount of teams and such a good AL this year with Milwaukee. They're going to have to play Milwaukee in the playoffs in Montreal potentially. So those teams are going to be real close. It might have to unload some of their farms even more here to be able to compete with them in the playoffs and just get those minor advantages by picking up the one extra piece. That could be the difference. So it'll be interesting to see which pieces they hold on to if they move some more of their farm system out there. Chicago Cubs coming up next. The Chicago Cubs uh, are actually on a tear lately in the major leagues. They're fighting for the wild card right now. So that's another team that could unload some of these guys in the next week here, trying to get a couple more pieces. Them in San Francisco, yourself there, and some other teams in the NL are kind of Seattle included are fighting for that last wild card spot right now in pretty close battle there. Everyone's within about 5 games of each other. What do you think about Chicago's system? I will say one more thing about them before you start is the third baseman, Danny Luna. This was the guy I wanted most in the international free agency. I'd lost out on him. Dude is a freak, so he doesn't come up as a ranked guy in this list either. I think he'll be very high in the OSA in a couple seasons here. One of the best third base prospects in all of baseball. So that's one guy that kind of headlines their system, even though he shows up a lot lower here on the OSA list. Do you have any other guys that stand out to you?
Yeah, they have a couple really nice pieces in the system. Really, the thing that I think causes them to rank so low is they don't have a ton of depth here, but they do have some really good top notch talent. On the offensive side, I'm praying he just stays in the minors this year so we can hopefully catch them. But Danny Madera is just a gigantic bat, and he's all filled out and looks pretty ready to go. So that's a pretty scary DH option if they decide to go with him. And they have a couple of really nice pitchers too. Not the top ones, Schaefer and Stone are probably their best one. But they also have a really nice relief pitcher prospect in Joe Armstrong, who slots up at their seventh prospect. Big time power lefty, who could be a back end reliever for them in the very near future. So it's a really good system. They have some good top tier talent here. A lot of good starters that are up and coming. On the offensive side, it's a little lighter after Madera, but that's a scary bet that they could have up very soon.
Yeah, I forgot. Devin Stone actually comes out as one of my highest ranked pitchers. In my formula, I think he comes out as a top 10 pitching prospect in baseball for me. So pretty nice little elite talents they have at the top of that system for sure. So again, like you said, we'll really keep an eye on them because I think that's one of the teams that can prove the most at the deadline. They have some holes in their lineup, and I think with that good of a system, I think they could a couple more good pieces could really help them out quite a bit. Next up, we have Minnesota. So Minnesota has made a lot of big trades the last few years. Big part of the system, and some of these guys are actually graduated already, like Moises Gonzalez. Like you mentioned earlier, come over from that Dodgers trade for Juan Vasquez. That was a crazy trade. An elite shortstop at 22 years old, getting traded for a boatload of prospects. So some of them are still in the pipeline here that haven't debuted in the majors, and they have some other top prospects. They just today traded, I think, the guy that comes out at the top of the list, if I'm not mistaken, there, Barraza. They just traded Barraza today, along with a Ozzy Albies in a big trade for, I think, Brandon. Or was it Brandon Davis they traded for to Houston?
Hmm. Hmm.
But do you have anyone else at the top of that system that still stands out?
Yeah, it's a system I like. I think they come they're in the top half for me. They have some really top tier bats in this system. So even, I had Barraza as a top 50 bat, and he was the fourth best bat in that system for me.
Jeez.
Um, Talbot is extremely elite. I think he's one of the best prospects in all of baseball. He's a top 10 hitter for me. A little lower down, I'm really a big fan of the catcher Juan Vera. He's young. He's got a long way to go. He's their rated prospect right now, but a big fan of his. Chalmers, their first round pick this year. Luis Salazar, another name. They have some bats that are ready to go. I'm not quite sure if any of the pitchers they have will be major contributors. Casey Weathers, who they picked in the draft this year, Casey Weathers Jr., I should say, has some very nice relief potential. But on the batting side, they have some really big time impact bats who could be really nice players soon.
Yeah, that those top two guys, real impressive infielders there. All three of those top guys on the OSA rankings are infielders, so pretty nice core they're building up there for sure. They also have some good young players on that roster to mix with these guys, so that should be a pretty competitive team for next, at least in the near future for sure. Next up, we have the Yankees. The New York Yankees, I think, I don't know if, yeah, so they've finally graduated their top player, the 80 power first baseman stud. But they still have some other guys at the top here that are pretty solid. I'm showing a lot of pitchers from the OSA side of things, along with their first round pick here, Mike Grace. Mike Grace is a big time talent in center field. He's starting off real nicely down in rookie ball this year with a 130 WRC plus two and playing almost at a 50 center field rating already at the age of 19, which is pretty impressive. So huge contact, or sorry, power and eye combination. And so you're just waiting on that contact. And once he starts to develop that contact, he should fly through the system. So I really like that prospect. And they also have some pretty quality arms here at the top. It looks like their top guy is real developed there, Mike Gonzalez.
Yeah, on the offensive side, they're kind of like the mold we talked about in Seattle, where they have Grace, who is a pretty elite. I would say a top 20 offensive prospect to me, and then a number of good shortstops throughout the system. That'll will totally wow you offensively, but they're very good defensively. Mincer, Mahaffey, Jones, they come out among the top guys in their system for me, as well as some catchers as well. So a little built like Seattle in terms of building from the inside out there in terms of their offensive prospects. On the pitching side, yeah, I like three of those starters: Mike Gonzalez, Dan Roberts, and Mario Galvez. Are all three guys who look like they could be back end of the rotation quality, which is always a nice thing to have. So a big fan of what they have, and a lot of this talent is close. Gonzalez is up recently. The other pitchers are close too, so they have some help pretty near. So it'll be interesting to see how kind of Grace progresses through the system. As like you said, it's off to a good start, so they could use another big bat, and he'd play up very nicely in New York.
Yeah, as you're talking about Galvez there, I clicked on his profile, and holy smokes, my scout must be really high on him because those ratings, that should be ranked way higher than he is. That's an incredible four pitch profile with all green across the board there and 101 velo. So pretty impressive player. I like that guy a lot. Next up, we have the LA Angels on the list. The LA Angels come out near the middle of the pack in your rankings, showing 3 top 100 guys, 7 top 200 guys. Pretty nice system overall. Oh, sorry, I just clicked on the wrong button here. I'll pull them up here, and I know you like a couple of these guys at the top here. Uh, I forgot these two were on the same team. I know I like these guys a lot in back-to-back drafts. Jeremy Lux and Kevin Faulkner, both pretty high-end talent when it comes to the bat side of things.
Yeah, it's I'm a big fan of the top of the system. It's another one that they slip really because of a lack of depth. But Gabe Baldwin's my favorite pitching prospect. So obviously love that at the top. And then I think they've made two great back-to-back draft picks with Faulkner and Lux. They both come out among, Lux for me is a top 10 bat, Faulkner just outside the top 20. And that's a nice potential future outfield pairing there. Two big bats. Faulkner can play a very good center field as well. And then they have some other power bats, Juan Velasquez and Chad Berry, two other young and developing bats who I'm quite a big fan of. So it'll be interesting to see how this system, they're kind of in a transitional period where, last year they had a big free agency, tried to buy a lot of players. It didn't exactly pan out. So they're kind of a team like Houston where they have a good bit of talent on that team. Be interesting to see what they do at the deadline if they try to add to this system a bit. But at the top there, some very elite future prospects.
Yeah, that it's pretty shocking looking at Lux how similar that profile grades out to Bellinger. Not quite the defender, which is the main difference. A young Bellinger could play some center field there, but Lux looks like he can play a pretty high level left field still. Just yeah, the almost identical best of peak Bellinger there with the potential. It's just a absolute boomstick he has there, which is pretty impressive. Detroit comes up next. Detroit is right near the middle of our rankings. I think that takes us one spot away from the halfway point. Detroit has a couple really interesting arms near the top of the system. Very arm heavy if you look at the OSA side of things. Almost every single player except for those three in the middle and one in here, one here. So 23 of the top 27 players on the OSA are pitchers. But I do like some of those hitters quite a bit. Sheets has a pretty big bat.
Yeah, it's a solid system. Macon, he just mentioned he's going to get the call in the year he get, super advanced. One of the most advanced pitchers I think I've ever seen in a draft. It's quite a quick timeline up to the majors for him, but that's going to be interesting to see how he works. Just elite movement control profile on Macon. The other pitcher I really like the most in their system comes out a bit lower. It's Jonathan Feeblecorn, another pick they made in the second round. Really like him as a high schooler. I think he's going to develop really nicely. So on the pitching side, a lot of names. Larson, I like a lot too. So it'll be fun to watch them develop. Offensively, it's a bit light. Sheets is a big time bat for them, and really the only kind of what I'd consider to be a big time prospect is Pat Pierce, who I thought was a great draft pick at the time. He's fallen a bit in potentials for me, but still among the better catching prospects we have in baseball. So those are two guys who should be thought of as future starters as well. So as a team that's right now kind of in the middle in the standings, they're kind of in the middle of the organizational standings as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they try to go up in one or down in the other. But yeah, they're in a fun place right now.
Yeah, that'll be real interesting. I think it'll they definitely look like they can compete in the second half of the season in the AL there because I think their pitching's underperforming quite a bit there. Their hitters are doing okay, but I think some of those arms should start playing a little better in the second half than they have. So could see them really battling at the deadline to pick up a few stars. We'll see. Like you said, though, hard to predict. Next up, we have Oakland. Oakland comes out on the halfway point of this list on the ELO side of things here. You have them just a little bit lower. They have two top prospects in the top 100, five here in the top 200, and 13 in the top 500. So we'll peek at Oakland here and see what they got. I know when you first look at the OSA thing, the thing that jumps out to me is their top corner bats there, Lutz and McElderry, both very good offensive players. Both kind of look like corner outfielders for sure. And then I like that Belk guy in the middle. I remember him from this previous draft. I was really tempted to take him at my supplemental pick.
Yeah, Lutz in particular is just a massive potential bat. I think it's one of the in all the systems is one of the highest graded hit potentials we had. So he is a big time option. It's good to see him getting some playing time, and Doing pretty good so far, swinging the bat down rookie ball. On the pitching side, it's a little lighter. They do have one guy who I consider to be a pretty top prospect on the pitching side, and Dave McGalliard. Still quite young. That was their selection this year in the first round. But really like his mix. A lot of we just touched on Jaden Macon for Detroit. A lot of that in his profile. So he's got a good bit of a ways to go in terms of development, but that high control and high movement potential is one we've seen work really well for guys in the past. So nice 4 pitch mix on him. So yeah, they have some really top options there, especially a potential ace in my opinion, Galliard, and a potential clean up middle of the order bat and Lutz. So they have a few very nice pieces to build around.
Yeah, that a couple of those guys doing real well in the minors too. That top college bat they got last year in the draft, Mick Eldery, on pace for 5.3 WAR in the minors this season in A ball there, which is pretty crazy. So expect a promotion out of him pretty soon there, just mashing the ball down there at that level. Next up, we have St. Louis. St. Louis comes out. Just peeking for them on your list here. St. Louis comes out middle of the graph here on the ELO rankings, and they come out quite a bit lower on your rankings based on they get hurt from a lack of depth, but they do have a couple guys there still ranked pretty decently high in the system. I'll pull up them on the screen. Um, Interesting group here. I know Marisic, I remember him from the draft last year, the big hit tool, that high school guy with 65 hit tool. Is there anyone else that stands out to you as a potential star from this system?
Yeah, it's interesting. I promise I wasn't being biased against the team that's kicking my butt right now in my division. But even their top guy on the bat side, it appears has now left their pipeline, and that's Steve Hagg. I think he's back down in AAA now, but he was up for the majors for a good bit of this year. So he's one of the better young shortstops we have in baseball. So he was driving a lot of value in that system. He didn't do too great this year, but I think he has definitely brighter days ahead of him. On the pitching side, my top guy would be Mike Savigny. Really like him as a potential starter. Think he has it's a 75 fastball, and he's not too far away. Just needs that changeup to come along a little bit. But he's off to a good start this year in his first season as a late first round pick this year. So he'll be an interesting one to watch for them. But they have some good middle of the field talent, especially with Hag. Josh Bevins is another interesting guy for them on the offensive side. So be interested to see another team that's really good at the majors, but they are aging a bit at the major league level. So it'll be interesting to see if this system starts to get built up a bit more.
Yeah, I think they're one of the oldest teams, especially the couple like Matt Chapman. A few of those guys are real getting old real quick there, so we'll need some replacements coming in the next few seasons. Next up, we have Washington. Washington comes up a little bit higher on these ELO rankings than your rankings. Similar situation. They don't have a ton of talent at the top or depth-wise, but they do have a couple guys I know off the top of my head in that system that I do really like. I think Jake Frasco is a real interesting two-way guy. They got the draft this year. Guy's a pretty good first baseman, and he's a pretty good pitcher. So real nice profile out of him. It's the first time I've actually looked at his stats since the draft. He's hitting very well down in rookie ball there, and he's actually pitching decently too. Hitting a little better than he's pitching, but pretty solid start out of him. And I know from last draft, Jerry Alvarado was a guy I really liked. He must come up pretty high on the rankings that you're looking at there.
Yeah, he does. He's their second highest bat for me. I'm actually in love with the guy who comes really actually their 11th prospect, Eddie Ayala, who has elite potential as a center fielder and a second baseman for them. It's a solid bat. It's not a great bat, but he's a potential plus defender at both with a durable profile. So that kind of versatility, especially as we start to see some range age out a little bit in the majors. He's a big time prospect for me. But yeah, right behind him, Alvarado, Vinny Fernandez is another guy I really like in that system on the offensive side. And then their pitching guys, you just mentioned Frasco. Yeah, he comes out as the top pitching prospect for me. It's nice that he has the ability to do both. But Danny Diaz is another nice option with the 60 potential stuff, who's coming along pretty nicely for a 20-year-old with that 5 pitch mix. So they have some good options there. It does suffer from a little bit of a depth issue, but they're another team who will be interested to see at the trade deadline is they have a good amount of talent in the majors. They've fallen a bit back in the standings and could even improve upon a pretty solid system.
Yeah, they have a couple of real nice pieces. I was looking at them earlier. They could unload here at the deadline. Next up, we have Atlanta. So the last year's World Series champs here come out in the top half of the league in farm system standing. So pretty good place to have a ton of talent in the majors, enough to win the World Series, and still be in the top 16 here for minor league talent. I know they have a guy at the top of the system here that's one of my favorite prospects in baseball is Gaston Ray. I tried to trade for him early in the year and got a hard no. Understandable. The guy has a big time bat for a second base prospect. Looks like he should be able to play second base or first base there at a pretty high level. A big time uh, combination of contact, gap power, and home run power. So real rare to get a nice young 20-year-old that's that developed with the power side of things. It still has a decent amount of range. Plays some defensive spots there, and they have a couple other guys at the top here. I know Edgar Nava comes out extraordinarily high in my rankings. Guy has a crazy two-pitch combination with some super high currents for his age. So a couple nice guys at the top here. Is there anyone else that you think is worth a mention?
Yeah, well, obviously we have to miss on Barraza, so a great July 2 signing for them. He comes out as a top 20 prospect right away. Outside of those two, my favorite prospect is probably the first baseman, Jorge Garces. It's not a great personality, but for a fifth round pick back in 2029, it's a big time bat potential. You've seen profiles like that with the good power and eye perform well as a fly ball hitter. So after those two at the top, I think is a pretty obvious 1 and 2 with Ray and Nava. He's a favorite of mine. Mike Evans on the pitching side as well. Big time stuff potential from him. So it'll be interesting to see. Kind of like my pitcher from the right side who I drafted this year, Chris Botex, with that high stuff and kind of underdeveloped movement and control. So be interesting to see how those guys go at the top. But like you said, a lot of talent at the major league level. So it'll be interesting to see how long these guys, if they actually make it to the majors, and as Zach has shown a willingness to flip these guys for talent on a whim.
Yeah, all those top four are going to be on the hot seat here in a week here, since Atlanta's competing so hard in the NL there for the playoffs and trying to probably move up and get a bye there from that first wild card round. So the could always have some of those guys on the move, and I know that'll catch a lot of teams' attention there if they could get a star back if. For someone like Ray, who has a ton of value in a trade there. So we'll see how that happens and unfolds. Next up, we have San Francisco, your pride and joy there. San Francisco is a system that ranks, we're just outside the top 10 here now. And then on the rankings here, depth wise, they're looking pretty good. I know you have quite a bit of prospects here. The one that stands out the most is quite a bit of prospects in the top 500 there. So pretty good depth in the middle there. And you have two top guys. I know I'll give you a chance to talk about some of your own players there for sure. And that doesn't include the superstar you just signed, Cesar Fantini. This guy is unbelievable. This J2 guy you just signed has a monster ceiling. So I'd imagine you're going to rank quite a bit higher on this list when he debuts next year or even potentially the year after. He's so young. But this guy is a top 3 OSA player. So I'd imagine you're going to jump about 5 spots in the rankings next year just based off this guy alone.
Yeah, it's an owner goal to turn it into a top 10 system, and we've been struggling on that a bit recently. So nice to get him in and hopefully start to change that a little bit. Yeah, it's more built on depth than it is on any top tier talent. I think offensively, the guy who I picked this year in the second round, Josh McKenzie, comes out as really my top guy with his just ability to play center field. The bat on Argueta is a thing I like and I'm looking forward to. I'm still keeping him down in rookie ball, although he should probably be above it at this point. But really a fan of his game. And then on the pitching side, it's pretty light, honestly. I really do like Chris Botex, who I took this year in the first round. Just a nasty stuff lefty. I'm not sure if everyone was a big fan of the pick, but I really think he's going to be very good. Think he's doing well early in rookie ball, which I like to see. Just need him to stay healthy and keep growing into hopefully 50 movement and 50 control potential, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'll mention one more guy in your system that I really like personally is Willie Mercado here. I think he is one of the most underrated players in the USA. As I mentioned earlier, they don't rank defense very highly. I think this is one of the best shortstop slash second base prospects in the league. Very advanced bat for an athletic young middle infielder. So I think this guy, now he's up in the majors a little bit, he's already hitting pretty well early on there. This guy is going to be a real good player for quite a long time. So I think he should probably be definitely in the top 100 in the USA, in my opinion. That guy, real nice overall profile. Next up, we have the Chicago White Sox. So this is a real interesting one because this team comes out as number one overall in your rankings, and they don't even come out in the top 10 in the ELO. So that's the biggest difference so far. Part of that's my fault. A lot of the ELO rankings I didn't realize how good their system was. I had underrated them a little bit until after I went back and looked, and I realized I was too low on them also. So I think they could be a little bit higher here on this ELO ranking if people took a little bit more of a deep dive. That system is loaded with talent.
Yeah, it's in particular on the offensive side, it's actually ridiculous. A lot of big time power bats. You know, Pat Carlson just got the call, so he's just recently promoted and off to a pretty good start in the majors so far. But you know, Joe Blankenship comes out as my second overall hitter in all of baseball. So obviously a huge fan of his, but Mike Dorn, Jose Lopez, Sergio Lucio, Josh Benson, all top 100 bats for me. Now, they do play kind of, with the exception of Blankenship, they're kind of first base slash corner outfielders, which could get a little heavy. But in terms of bat potential, these guys all grade out super, super high. And the pitching side is really good too. They have a number of starters who I think are, you know, future rotation guys. Alfredo Pacheco's is my favorite of the group. I know he comes out as number 15 in their system, but I love his potential. Rob Shepard and Edwin Bautista kind of right behind in that group, but a lot of young pitchers. That'll be interesting to see how they grow, not even counting the 16-year-old Vinicio Cabrera. So they have a lot of talent. I think 23 in the top 500, according to OSA. So I agree. I think, you know, it may not be the top system. It's just kind of how it came out for me, but it's got to be one of the top five.
Yeah, it's an absolutely loaded position player class for sure, and I really like those arms at the top too. So yeah, overall, it's a real good mix of talent they have. They could infuse a ton of talent. I know right now Mike Murphy, their star outfielder, isn't eligible to be traded because he just signed the extension. But I think next year, maybe at the deadline or something, he or even this offseason potentially, he could return a huge coup of prospects there because that guy is one of the best players in baseball, and he's over 30 years old now on a rebuilding team. So wouldn't expect to see him in Chicago for the long run, but who knows? They might be able to turn around fast and hold on to him. He's a pretty special talent, but we'll see if they can improve that system even more if they end up flipping him eventually. That's something to keep an eye on. Next on the list, I have Miami here. Miami comes up. Let's see here. I didn't count them very well here. So Miami, I think we're just into the side of the top 10 now. So Miami comes up as a system. I'll pull them up here. I got a lot of arms at the top here in the system, and we're showing 23 players in the OSA top 500. Is there any in specific that you like, or is it more of a depth organization?
No, I really think on the offensive side, I'm really impressed by them. They have a couple guys who I really like. The top one being Ismael Gomez, who is actually listed as a left fielder in their system. Just getting to start in rookie ball now, but this guy can play all over the place. A lot of second and third corner outfield pretty well, with a big time contact potential bat. The kind of guy that they, you know, that fits well in Miami's park with the gap power as well. So really like him and his potential. Ben Crocker is a massive bat as well, and he's making his way through the system really nicely, hitting the ball great this year in Double A. So he's not far
Oh
off from
wow,
the majors. And then on the pitching side, you know, it's a couple of good arms. Farias and Ramon Rosas are probably my two favorite, and they're ranked very highly by OSA. So yeah, it's a deep system as well. You know, I know there's guys who I've looked at in drafts lower, like Chris Altieri, Sean Verdon as well. So they got some talent throughout this system. I think I had them ranked as a top five system, and you know, really impressive. it's always tough, in Miami with the constraints you have to deal with, and he's shown a willingness to trade some of his top guys like Capelli and Zambrano to kind of bolster this system. So imagine more of the same, but love the job he does building up this organization. It's a really good group.
Not to mention, I think they just had the um, minor league All Star Game MVP there, and Sean Verdon. I think he, if I remember correctly, looking at the box score, this guy's on pace for almost 5 WAR. He, pretty sure he had the big game there in the All Star game. It looks like, yeah, he's this game here on the recent games list, 3 for 5 with a home run and RBI. So that's another standout for them at the highest level. Next up, we have coming up here. Now that we're in the top 10, we're getting some of these juicy systems here. Toronto. Toronto is, I'm just peeking on your list here. They come a little, yeah, they come in the top half in both these rankings. Toronto has a few pieces they just added to their system too. Big trade last sim, which I don't think is even coming up in our ratings yet. Like we talked about earlier from Colorado, adding a couple more pieces. They got one of my favorite players in the draft this year, an AJ Fiola, who is in A ball already, and a real good third baseman, and a couple other top prospects on the list here at the top that aren't counting. So I think this system would jump right to the top, near the top of the rankings here if you counted these two international guys at the top, both teenagers, just barely 17, 18 years old.
Yeah, when you look at this system, with those two top guys plus the addition of Morel, my ranking's probably too low on them. This is some real elite talent at the top. On the offensive side, the two bats in the middle there, Flores and Fiola, are both pretty elite prospects. Flores listed as shortstop, but he's probably more of a get away with at second base. But Fiola's a really good third baseman, so. Those are two nice infielders to kind of build around on the offensive side. And the pitching side, Joe Wallace is one of my favorite pitching prospects, and he comes just barely in the top 100 as their ninth best prospect. Really high movement from him. He must have just turned 25,
Oh, that's
25
right.
in 11 days. So he just slid on this in my system, but he's a guy who I would expect to be up in the majors pretty soon, having a really nice year in AAA. But a couple of really nice pitching prospects there too. Luis Flores. We already mentioned Morel, who they just got. So it's a really nice system. I obviously have them a bit too low if you take everything into account here, but yeah, they're gonna come back here pretty strong soon. It's been a few years since we've seen them up and competing like they did in the early days, but I can't imagine that'll last too much longer.
Yeah, it's a pretty loaded system. I'm looking at this list now. Number 12 on the OSA list is Omar Barba. And if this guy is your 12th best prospect, 80 contact, 80 gaps, 60 home run power, top international signee last year, from what I remember, $5 million guy that everyone wanted, 60 range, 70 arm. Yeah, if this guy's your number 12 prospect, you're doing things pretty good. And future's looking pretty bright there. Next up, we have Arizona. We're getting near the top of these systems here, getting some really nice looking prospects, I'd imagine. When I look at Arizona here, I'm seeing a lot of arms pop up pretty high on this list, and one center fielder at the top who I know I really liked from the Forbes rankings last year. This guy is real talented, Godinez.
Yeah, they have two pretty big time bats for me as top 50 bats. Both Godinez and Jose Gomez are two pretty elite talents. The year Jose Gomez is having in between A and high A is pretty ridiculous. He's just seeing the crap out of the ball in high A right now. But big time gap power on him. Godinez, yeah, he's good, and he's a legit center fielder too. He can get away with it at the position. So as a switch hitting center fielder, gotta like his profile a lot too. So some really nice things to like on the offensive side. Other bats like Phil Vigil, Joey Biaggi, Gur Van Dam there as well. Some big time offensive threats coming up through that system. They always do such a good job with their organization too. So these guys are always set up for success. But on the pitching side, they have a couple of those really high movement options. Ben DeWeese and Kevin Lazarov, both with 65 and 70 from my scout movement potential. So gotta like them and what they could bring to a team pretty soon. So do really like their system, and like I said, they're always way up in those organizational standings. So a deep system as always.
And you're saying that Gomez's year. Did you see Godinez's stats this season so far?
Yes.
Holy smokes! If anyone looking at the screen here, 426 on base percentage, 8 home runs in 52 games out of an athletic center fielder. 187 WRC plus. So that's some ridiculous numbers out of those top two hitters there, Gomez and Godinez. What a system and what performance they got there going on. Holy smokes. Next up, we have Nashville. So Nashville is a team built up pretty good system here in a short amount of time as an expansion team just a few years ago. They have a lot of nice center fielders and catchers popping up on this list from first glance here. And I know they had some guys that just recently graduated, so the system was probably even higher in the last year or two. They have the best rookie in the major leagues this year, who's hitting 350. Would have been on this list last year. So pretty nice young core of talent that organization's built up.
Yeah, they've lost a lot recently. You know, Leyva, who you mentioned, is probably going to win Rookie of the Year. Pitching side, guys like Bobby Scalise, they lost as well. So they've kept a very strong system. Yeah, Mario Molina is probably my favorite catching prospect in baseball. So really like him a lot. Think he's going to be a good future backstop for them. But even outside of him, two huge bats and Jose Murillo and Pete Laskowski. Additionally, with their first round pick this year and Nate Danzy, three big time bats. They're a little at the moment. They're a little first base heavy as is, so not sure how that all slots out, but very good there. On the pitching side, Tim Spencer is a favorite of mine. I really like that profile. We see a lot of guys with that profile who we've touched on here, but Paradowski as well is really nice. So they have a good system. They're going to kind of keep the train rolling. They're another team that has a few fun pieces to move at the deadline, so could continue to bolster this as well and continue to grow for the future.
Wow, I'm just looking. Check out Josh Robinson, that center fielder down in. He's up in Double A, and he's hitting 362 as a draft pick last season. So, what a crazy advanced profile there from a guy that was just drafted last year to be that high of a level, doing that well already. Pretty impressive. Next up on this list, we have San Diego. So San Diego is another team that ranks pretty highly already, but also, like we mentioned with some of the teams earlier, probably could come out quite a bit higher soon because they have a lot of talent on their major league roster that is on the trade block right now that could be moved for some pretty good prospects. I know that Escorte and Tuzio and Tatis are all potentially available right now. So that's something to keep an eye out on top of an already pretty deep system with one of the best prospects in all baseball headlining that and Danny Espinosa.
Yeah, no, they I think I'm a little lower on them in mine, mainly because a couple of these guys have missed. Both Chris Brown and Mario Yasagir are in the majors now, so they missed my cutoff there, and Ricky Morales is in the complex. But those are three pretty elite arms who are kind of missing my criteria for it. But Danny Espinosa is an elite future prospect. He's a top 5 position player for me. Probably ends up slotting as like a very good defensive right fielder, but it's a gigantic bat. Him and Sam Gear in particular, two really big time bat options that I like a lot moving forward. The pitching side is good. It's a lot of guys who they actually have one of my favorite relief pitching prospects in Phil Popst. Really like his potential, so I'll be interested to see how he develops. I think he comes out as their number 20 prospect. He's pitching in high A and needs to move up because he's really dominating hitters down there. But it's like you mentioned, big time guys. Tatis, you wonder how his time's going to end up in San Diego. So it'll be interesting to see what they do at the deadline. It's a really good system and could continue to get better.
Yeah, that'll be something to keep an eye on for sure in the next week. Pittsburgh comes out next, number 6. So now we're getting to the nitty gritty here, right near the top. Pittsburgh has 4 top 100 players on your list there, 46 as the third best depth out of any system. Coming out with the 46 is the third highest total of top 1,000 prospects. So start to get some really, really good depth here in these top teams. And Pittsburgh in specific has a lot of solid prospects. Is there anyone you want to kind of call out at the top of their system?
Yeah, it's not surprising with the depth, right? Alex is such a good drafter. Even the talent they have at the major league levels pretty much all come up through their system. So he does such a good job with acquiring talent and developing it well in their minors. Really, they have one arm and one bat who are super impressive to me. Manny Cano, who actually comes out as their number 11 prospect. I love, my scout at least loves. He doesn't play anywhere particularly well defensively. He's kind of one of those tweener second base, third base types. But I do grade him out as an 80 potential contact bat. Be interested to see how he kind of grows through the system. He's getting his first experience here in rookie ball this year, hitting it all right as an 18-year-old, but excited to watch him develop. And then the other one is their first round pick from this year, Ben Drennan, another young kid who's down in rookie ball right now, off to a pretty nice start for them. But love his profile. Think that fastball is going to continue to grow as his velocity goes up. And then two pretty plus secondary pitches. So those are two pretty elite options around a system that has a ton of depth and guys who could jump up in a moment. But love what he does with the system, and they're strong again as always.
Just noticed when you're talking about Ben Drennan there, Oak Hill Academy. That is the school, a basketball powerhouse. I know they've recruited some top talents over the years. One of those prep schools, Carmelo Anthony, most notably coming from there, and he's 6'7". So I'm wondering if this guy was a two-sport guy in high school. Played some power forward in basketball there. Also, like Alex mentioned, a Boris client, $9.5 million signing bonus. So you better hope that he does turn into a pretty decent player. I know the ceiling's real high, but that kind of bonus money in a high school guy is always tough if they don't turn out. So all eyes will be on him. I'm sure they'll do everything they can to develop him correctly over the next few years. Next up, we have our top five. So we're at the top of the cream of the crop there. Cleveland comes out at number 5 on the ELO rankings here. Cleveland system has some real good depth here at the top. A lot of nice position player bats that I really like here, especially.
Yeah, they're actually for me my favorite position player back comes out quite far down. Now it may end up being Okada, who's a great J2 signing for them. But I love Alfredo Magana down there at number 17 in their system, getting his first shot this year. I think he came over from Boston in the Morante trade. But yeah, he's a really elite second baseman prospect to me. Good bat at the position, plays the position well defensively. And you see, he's trying to shop. He's got guys pretty ready to go here in the minors. Luis Diaz and Chris Thomas are two pretty good corner outfield bats who are kind of knocking at the door in Double A and High A respectively. So I'll be interested to see if they get the call. On the pitching side, Tristan Calhoun's a top 20 pitching prospect for me. 10 for OSA is maybe a little higher than I'd have him, but I still think he's very good. Another guy in AAA just knocking at the door. You look at all those pitchers, Calhoun, Sublette, and Sanders kind of filling out their AAA rotation, all knocking on the door. So kind of an embarrassment of riches here for the Spiders with those kind of prospects. But again, a really good system that Shane does a good job with.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what moves they make. I know they could go either way. They could really go all in and try and be able to compete well with Milwaukee and Colorado there. I know they've talked about trading one of their top level talents in the majors with kind of a position clog up there, left field, first base type guys. So they could get even more prospects here in the system. So we'll see what they do at the trade deadline there. They could go either direction. Number 4, we have the Boston Red Sox come out pretty high here. They come out at top 6 on your list, and they come out 4 here, so pretty close in the rankings there between both. Boston system is nasty. I know they have a lot of guys I specifically like. They got a couple ridiculous center fielders, so I don't even think are in these rankings that me and you did on Excel. So that would probably push them even higher. They have a center fielder specifically in the complex that has 70 contact and 70 home run power, and Ivan Gonzalez at 65 range. Pretty much good at everything. A true 5-tool player, has big time range and speed, high work ethic, everything you like in an international prospect. And then another guy actually ahead of him in the OSA rankings that's coming out at a 70 contact and 70 eye for my scout. The OSA is a little lower on him, but Victor Fonseca here, pretty ridiculous talent. Also has high work ethic and a high leadership. So a weird nickname on him, Puke. That's kind of strange, but that's just the international prospects, and obviously there's probably some more prospects we can talk about here at the top of their system. One guy in particular, as you can see here, is number 7 on the OSA list, coming out real high.
Yeah, starting with the offensive side, Galarza is one of my favorite bats around. The guy can get away with He's listed as a first baseman, and maybe he ends up being there. But with an 80 arm, the dude can get away with it at third base, if you ask me. Up in AAA, and they're pushing him pretty hard. He just turned 21, so a guy who's knocking on the doorstep in a lot of ways. Big time bat potential with contact and power. A little off those potentials, so not quite ready yet for another jump. But like him, Red Army, that nickname's got to play very well in Boston too. Alex Dominguez is one of my favorite catching prospects who they picked this year. Really like his. It's a big time bat for a catcher. With 60 ability, he can play well. I think he was drafted kind of as a. I think he was listed as a reliever at the draft with this kind of catching potential. So, gotta like him. And on the pitching side, yeah, Orta and Lowry really both for me. Lowry comes out way down at 198, but really like him with that stuff movement potential. Both of those guys in AAA, a lot of these pitchers, Orta, Chris Logan, Lowry, Vega, who doesn't even make the list as a 25-year-old, all in their AAA rotation. So they got arms at the ready when that time is needed. So very strong system. Obviously, as you can see in both the rankings, a top five-ish organization, so I really like them.
Yeah, it's a lot of talent there for a team that's compete for a playoff spot. So yet another team that has ample riches to go out and go crazy at the deadline if they need. I know they have a ton of money coming off the books next season, so this free agency could be wild for them. They could pick up a ton of guys under contract for the next few years, specifically. As you can see there, almost all their top 12 players come off the books next year. Literally, the only one has a team option, which will probably be declined since Sean Murphy's 38 years old. He might even retire here, but pretty interesting. I think that'll be one of the main teams we'll all be watching at the trade deadline here. Is Boston could make some major noise. Already made a couple big moves this week, which is pretty cool. They bought some prospects off the White Sox with some of their extra cash, so they just keep adding to that system, and we'll see if they keep doing that to the deadline, kind of stand pat, or if they start to really go all in there, competing with those elite teams. Next up on this list is KC. KC has some very high level talent. I know on the Excel we weren't quite as high on them as they're more of a middle of the pack team based on a real lack of depth compared to those other top teams at 22 prospects in the top 1,000, where all the other teams above them are in the 30s and 40s. But the guys they have at the top kind of carry the system there, and they're pretty high level major league guys, which especially the top guy there coming out as the number one ranked pitching prospect in all of baseball.
Yeah, you see why it gets voted so highly. With six top 100 guys, only a couple of these teams, Cleveland, Chicago, and I think tied with Minnesota and Boston, come out with as many as them. So in terms of elite talent, for me, they're right up there with the best systems. It does have a bit of a lack of depth. And really, the issue is when you look at this system, a lot of these guys have just recently graduated to the majors. So they're showing up in here, and I think that's probably what people went off of. But that's those didn't all apply for my ranking. So guys like Gonzalez at 11, Almaraz at 28, Navarez, Mondragon, who was ranked as my best relief pitching prospect, just graduates. So a lot of talent in the system that just got to the majors there. On the bat side, Jerry Swain and Tyler Barron are two pretty good future players. Swain is an elite center fielder for me. I really like him a lot. He's a top 15 position player. And then I think they had really what was my biggest steal in the draft this year in Jeff Mugler. I considered him at my first round pick. He was my favorite position player at the pick. Think he's going to be a big time second baseman for them in the future. So love that. And then on the pitching side, yeah, Duran is my number two pitching prospect behind Baldwin for the Angels. So elite potential there from the 19-year-old lefty. But gotta really like their system, especially here at the top. Some big time potential contributors.
Yeah, as you're talking about Moeller there, I was looking at stats. Holy smokes. Small sample size, but 15 games, he hit 383 and three home runs and that 183 WRC plus in short season, 1.2 WAR in 15 games. Then gets promoted because he's killing it too much. Then he goes up and does even better at high A. The guy has a 250 WRC plus in 9 games. Already has two home runs there and 1200 OPS. Just absolutely murdering minor league baseball pitching right now. So who knows? That guy could be in the majors pretty soon. I think I'll probably have to request a scouting report because I'd imagine how much he's killing it right now. His ratings might be even better than what's showing up on my screen. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. That's one of the best starts I've ever seen to a minor league career, especially at a pretty advanced level too. It's not like he's a college guy down a rookie. He's doing that to high A ball pitching, which is crazy. So pretty neat. We'll move on here. At number two, we have Baltimore, and you probably think a little bit of bias here, so I could rate myself high, but this is actually, I didn't change this. This is just the numbers that came in from Colorado there, their GM. But I won't be biased, so I'll let you talk about my system a little bit if there's anyone catches your eye. No, I don't have any of those guys that really stand out as super elite prospects, but I have quite a bit of depth, and I think that's why I'm pretty high up on this list. If you look at the ratings here, I think I had the second highest amount of top 1,000 guys at 49, only trailing the Mets here. We'll talk about in a second as the best system. But yeah, quite a bit of pitching depth, especially in my system. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm clearly a hater having you at third in mine. Most top 500 prospects, which is another great sign of depth there. So not even the deep guys. You have a good glut of really solid talent throughout the system. It's interesting on both sides. For me, offensively, the best bat comes out to be a catcher who's not even ranked that highly, and Jose Esquivel, with some elite defensive ability. But a couple guys you've picked recently in the draft, especially middle infielders, Vince Anderson, Colt Foreman, Steve Naif, all really good middle of the field guys, who I think are going to have pretty good major league careers, at least as solid contributors. But the main thing is on the pitching side, really. One of my favorite relief pitcher prospects, in Danny Castillo, just a young, big time lefty, and really excited to watch him develop. And the other two are pretty. The other three starters, Bell, Foster, and Olvera. Olvera, has his deficiencies in terms of movement, but the guy has probably the most elite starting pitcher stuff of anyone in all of the minor leagues. So he has some very fun stat lines. It's usually he gives up 3 hits a start and two of them are home runs, but he's striking out everyone. And then Bell and Foster are two young high school draft picks. I think one might have joined just before you came on, but Bell was a great pick by you. One of my top 5 starting pitching prospects there. So really like the system. It's quite a turnaround from what we saw in the previous administration in Baltimore. So you've done a good job getting this turned around quickly.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I like the built up quite a bit of depth here. A couple off-season moves there, trying to unload some salary there. I couldn't quite afford to have under contract. Try to pick up, just go by kind of quantity more so than quality there, and pick up a decent amount of arms. So it kind of makes sense why I'd be up there in the for the depth side of things. Number one, this system is ridiculous. The ELO rankings have these guys at the top. The craziest part about this is they've added even more talent since these rankings came out, with a ridiculous talent they just picked up in the international market too. The New York Mets are head and shoulders above everybody else here in these rankings at 1720, highest on the ELO ranking. The New York Mets have 54 prospects in the top 1,000, which is way better. I'm second at 49, and then not many teams even above 38, 39. So it just shows how much of a crazy ratio that is of how much depth the system has. What can you tell me about this crazy New York Mets system?
Yeah, they really, they slot in fourth for me because they get a little disrespected with their number 2, 4, and 6 prospects, all not counting to what I was calculating. So those guys all look elite, and that would probably push them up a good bit. But OSA has it right with the best prospect in baseball. Dan Serratos is absolutely insane. I'm sure it's now been a while. He's been stuck at the number 1 spot, and for a good reason. It's good to see him up and starting to play some games. Off to a pretty good start swinging the bat down there in rookie ball. So imagine he has quite a quick rise through the system. Be interested to see where he ends up a year from today. But even outside of that, Andy Hill, a guy they picked a couple drafts ago, is a big time first base bat. They did the same with Rivera too. He's another big bat. So they've added a lot, especially on the offensive side. Really like a lot of their guys, John DeAngel, Marco Quintana as well. Really nice future contributors there. They have a couple of top pitchers for me as well. Pete McDonald is really elite. My favorite in the system, and he's actually being used as a closer right now. And he's kind of a tweener prospect, but I really like Jorge Lopez a lot. If that changeup just got a little more kick, he'd be a really, really good starter. He's struggling a bit this year in Double A against some tougher competition, but as a 21-year-old, he's got some time to develop there. So Lopez, Jeff Grinnell too, Pete McDonald at the top of that pitching. Very nice there. Be interested to see how they move along.
Yeah, just so many guys. Hard to even talk about them all. This system being so loaded, they got guys even just like I had to scroll the screen all the way down just to look at all their top 500 prospects on the OSA rankings. So pretty ridiculous amount of talent there. So we'll see how these guys all develop. The craziest part is if you look at their top eight guys here, sorry, top six guys. Only one of them is even 20 years old. So by the OSA rankings. So we'll see how these guys develop. This is about as much blue as you'll see in one system, though, with 80 all over the place here. 80, 75s, 70s, even down at 19, you got a 75 hit tool, 65 power. So pretty incredible system. So pretty exciting since the Mets have struggled for quite a while at the major league level. I'd imagine if they play their cards right over the next few seasons and don't go crazy just giving these guys away, that they'll have a pretty nice core. But again, you have to be patient because those guys are very young, so they're not going to be ready in the next year or two. It's going to take some time. So you just could be crazy how good this system is in 2-3 years if they hold on to all these guys and they're haven't graduated yet. This system could be even more incredible. So if he drafts a few more top guys, and should have another top 5 pick next season. By the way, things have gone for him this year in the majors. So what a crazy amount of talent! It's pretty exciting for any GM to have these type of bats and arms in the system. That concludes our top 32 teams in order. And I know that was a really long episode. We'll see if I split into two here. I'll probably edit some of it, but I hope you guys enjoyed if you stuck with us. I know I always enjoy talking about prospects, so the time kind of goes by quick, but I'm sure that was over an hour. But I'm really glad you joined us, Tyler. That was awesome analysis, and I hope you had as much fun as I did breaking down some of those systems.
Loved it. That was a great time.
All right, cheers, everybody. And next episode probably be a similar ranking for the top prospects. I know the Colorado GM there is going to put together a similar system for ranking prospects, which I think might be even funner because that'll be real cool seeing the top like 50 or 100 prospects in the league's view going head to head with each other in those rankings. So hopefully even more people put in some time and kind of rank some of those prospects for us and give in their list there, and we can get a real accurate list on that. So it'll be really neat. But that's enough for this episode. See you guys.